Hello everybody, and welcome to Veriff Voices, where we explore all things in the world of digital identity, including fraud, compliance, the latest tech innovations, and how the right digital identity provider can help you acquire more customers and power business growth. My name is Chris Hooper. I'm Global Director of Content Marketing here at Veriff, and today we are talking about digital identity. My guest to do so is Viktoria Ruubel, who joined us as Managing Director of Digital Identity in December 22. Now, here at Veriff, we're constantly refining and enhancing our offering to make the internet a safer place. And Viktoria is heading up one of the most exciting initiatives to do so. That is the expansion of Veriff's core product towards a digital identity platform. This will enable individuals and businesses to use a single digital identity across different multiple online platforms and applications. So first of all, I just want to say welcome to you, Viktoria, and I think let's just sort of get right into a little bit about you. I gave a sort of a slight hint of your background there, but it would be great if you could tell us a few words just about yourself and maybe some of the reasons of what drew you to sort of join Veriff in the first place, as sort of the company and the mission, and then a little bit about your role as well, as to say what it is you're actually working on right now.
Absolutely. It's really excited to be here, and thanks, Chris, for the intro. So I'm the Managing Director for Digital Identity, and as you mentioned, I joined end of last year, and I joined because I got really excited of what Veriff is trying to achieve by bringing the trust into the internet. My background is I think I've always been working on this kind of very challenging concept, really big problems, and thinking how to bring the technology to solve something that is like coming and solve it in a different way and in a better way. I think that has been always some kind of karma in a way, or it's like I'm really attracted. Like, so where is the complexity, where I can take something that is emerging and how can I commercialize it, how we can productize it, how I can look at the problems that consumers or businesses are facing and how we can apply to make it better, to make it faster. So, and I've been doing that for a very long time, over the 20 years, building products, building businesses. And I think I also picked up a lot of good stuff from big tech, influential big disruptors in technology like Meta. I've been into it. I've joined early Skype when Skype was extremely young, and that also gave me this a lot of motivation. You can go and you can disrupt the world and you can make things better. So that's my background, and I joined Veriff, I think, to do exactly that. I think we're solving a really, really big problem. If you look at the identity space, there are so many opportunities, but there are also many challenges, and we can help businesses and we can help consumers to really, build that trust and that relationship. And when you have that trust and relationship in the internet, the magic happens. And the magic is, I believe the magic in the digital identities, and that's why I'm here, to bring that magic to life and build a digital identity here at Veriff. So that's my story. That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm looking at the digital identity.
Excellent. And as I sort of mentioned in the intro, it is a really exciting project. But I think before we sort of get into it, it might be useful actually to kind of just focus in on digital identity and what it actually means. So let's get some sort of definitions in place. So could you explain in really simple terms sort of what digital identity is and how a reusable digital identity can come into play? Yeah.
Digital identity, there are so many definitions. When I joined, I had a background in financial services, so I did have an exposure to identity and how to do the KYC of end users, consumers, and also businesses. But when I started to look into this world of digital identities and reusable identities and sovereign identities, there are a lot of different definitions. So happy to give the simplest definition I find myself the most useful. So if you think about the digital identity, it's a unique representation of an individual or organization in the digital world, simple like that. And it has very specific identifiers. And the most simple digital identity that we have, this is our name, email address, and sometimes it can be the identifier coupled with our address. So that's the simplest way. It can be verified and it can be recognized, and we can use that to access different digital services. The more advanced digital identity, because there has been an evolution of digital identities over the time. So because digital identities, they are not static. They're like born together or at some point of time, and then they start to evolve and then mature. So digital identities are also evolving, and we also start to look what are the behavioral patterns of the users, transactions, those kind of things. Social media came, and there is a lot of digital footprints that we have across internet, and they all add up to the digital identity. But this is like the person in the digital world. Reusable identity is a very, very interesting concept. So reusable identity, it is also called at times portable identity. And reusable identity is it foundationally needs digital identity, but it's how this digital identity applied across multiple platforms and multiple use cases. So with digital identity, we go into one place, but we cannot be recognized. We need to enter all our credentials in another platform, in another product over and over and over again. Reusable identity enables to reapply that. So it's a cross-platform application. So simple as that. They are in a way living together. One needs reusable identity, needs digital identity. But in a nutshell, that is how we are representing ourselves in the digital world and how we use our credentials.
That's a really good definition. Thank you. And why? I guess the next question I will ask then is why is this important? What is it that businesses and individuals should be aware of that is sort of driving this to be such a big factor in the world right now, but the world as we envision it in the next couple of years as well?
Yeah, without digital identity, we literally cannot access the digital world. Because if you think everything we buy today, everything we do, everything is happening either on the mobile devices or on the desktop. So without having this digital identity, we're almost like invisible. We cannot access certain services, and we need to tell that we are who we are, and people need to believe us in order to give, provide us that service. So simple as that. The important is that because it enables people, the consumers, to access digital services and products, and for businesses is actually digital identity or verification of the person digitally is required to be able to offer the products and the services there. That's the really simplest way of saying like why it is needed and why it is important. But there is also was a very interesting research going kind of beyond that daily usage. McKinsey, a couple of years ago, they done a research where they looked at economies, very different economies, and they looked at the maturity of digital identities in those economies. So they looked at the Brazil, the United States, Estonia, like Estonia is the most advanced in terms of the digital identities, China, Ethiopia, India, Nigeria, like across multiple markets. And they found that there is a correlation between the advancement of the digital identity in the economy and how economy is actually growing. And what they said is that if the economy having this kind of advanced version of digital identity, it has a really positive impact on GDP. So it's like the impact, if you apply it now, the economy can grow between 3 and 13% of GDP in the next few years. So I think it tells a lot what digital identity enables, because again, it enables that interaction, but it also grows the economy. It gives the economy this competitive advantage. And that's why it's so important. It kind of opens the doors. It opens the doors for businesses, consumers. It opens the doors for governments. It opens the doors for economic growth, literally.
It sounds like a very sort of it sounds like a global issue, to be honest. I'm really curious, I guess, around how we've got to this point. So could you sort of shed any light on how the concept of digital identity has evolved over the last sort of however many years to sort of bring us to the point that we're at right now?
Absolutely. The most interesting fact, I think, if you think there are billions and billions of people on this planet, and if we think how many digital identities exist there out in the world, there are 4 billion digital identities because there are 4 billion people who actually interact on the internet, right? And if you think about how the world of digital identity was born, so it all started when the internet was born. So it started from zero, and then it started to scale into this massive 4 billion people, and so many companies actually were born just in the era of internet first, digital first companies. But it goes back to 1990, very long time ago, when internet was launched, and this literally was this centralized, federated digital identity. But it's a really simple way of, you have the name, you have the email address, and you have the password. And the digital identity or the digital account, I wouldn't call it, it was a representation, extremely basic representation of digital identity. So it was kind of managed, controlled, like the right word is most probably both the managed and controlled by one company, by providers. So it was literally really centralized, and everyone was relying on that provider, on the company, or the providers and companies to manage that and to actually store that, to protect that, and that was until 2008, 10. When things started to change. And we think about, again, 2008, 2010, what happened is Facebook was launched in 2008. So, for example, some of the biggest digital platforms, they were launched at approximately this period of time. This is where Google started to really, explode. And we started to see this more user-centric digital identities. And user-centric digital identities, it still was managed by the providers. So it's still centralized, but what happened, it started to have this component of cross-platforms through the single sign-on, where users maybe had a bit more control of saying, if we're signing with Google single sign-on, why we're signing and what kind of information we want to share and we don't want to share. So this kind of became a little bit of more control and more transparency on the user side. So, and the last, we are living now in this world of user-centric digital identities. They are still quite federated, but we already see these decentralized identities. And sometimes they're called self-sovereign identities. And the self-sovereign identity is when the individual becomes the identity provider. It's like their own identity provider. Literally, they own the data, they control the data, they manage the data, they say when the data can be used, how the data can be used, and if the data, when it's used, they have full control of that, and they can easily recall their data back. So that's the third kind of pillar of digital identity evolution that we are entering. It still didn't find its adoption, but we see that the future will be there. So where we're becoming more in control of our identities, digital identities.
Amazing. It's a really good sort of potted history there. I like that. Thank you very much. And I think it seems to me that the next iteration of this, if you like, is in the reusable digital identity space as well, which is kind of the bit I'd like to talk to next, if you like. So, what has caused the need for this reusable piece right now, and what do you think it is that is sort of happening in the wider economy and society at large to sort of drive the need for this reusable digital identity?
I think the biggest trigger for companies and businesses and governments and even consumers, when consumers started really caring about how their digital identity store is used, is actually started to happen with massive data leaks. So if you think about the data misuse and data leaks, there's been massive use cases from several years ago, Equifax, Yahoo, Uber, Meta, and so on. So I think that started to shift this perception of we thought that somebody is protecting our data, but it turns out that there is so much data out there that just the one company, and if it's all centralized, it cannot be really protected really well, and there needs to be different ways of how we store the data, use the data, see how the data is applied, and who has an access to the data. And it triggered all this kind of interest in terms of what kind of technologies we have, the blockchain, decentralized technologies, and how we can use the technological advancement that we have in order to solve these problems. And literally, it's a problem of the data management and the data leaks and the data storage. And this is where the reusable identity is coming in, because again, the reusability is it provides a different level of transparency and security and the control. And also, how you build the reusable identity. You can have the decentralized identity where it's not accessible for just one actor, and it's not that easy to steal that data. So there is much more control in terms of that. So on top of that, we also see that there are so many different digital identities. So as the consumers, we on average have around 100 different digital accounts. These are all of digital identities. And you still go and you still need to verify yourself every time you want to access new service. So, and businesses need to verify every time the new user is coming into their onboarding journey. So it's also on a more kind of practical level stats for the businesses, like how many times do I need to verify that person? And it just drives a lot of overhead, and it drives a lot of kind of operational costs, complexities, and just a bad UX experience. So all that drives is how we can do that differently, how we can grow differently, how we protect data differently, how we can get convenience to the consumers in a different way. And that's the topic of this digital identity and reusable identity is becoming really, really, really important and really critical.
Sure. I think it's just worth at this point actually just maybe throwing another definition in there, because there's lots of organisations across a number of different sectors. I'm sort of thinking, I mean, you mentioned financial services earlier actually, but sort of social media, marketplaces as well, for example. A lot of these organisations have built their own ways to verify a person's identity when they're using their services. How does digital identity differ from some of the other solutions that are out there?
If you think about the social media, I think social media identities with their single sign-on, the kind of, we're taking us closer to the reusability aspect, but this is still the digital identity that is centralized, that is managed, owned by a specific company, and is still very siloed. So you need to create, and you cannot reuse that. You need to ask for permission, or there needs to be certain rules, and then the company is actually allowing you to reuse some of the credentials with another company, and it's all in everything is very commercial in a way, in the commercial interest of those companies. So this identity, they are not they're very standalone data sets. So and when you think about the digital identity is a very really compounding identity. It doesn't belong to one specific company. It can consist of very different data points collected across multiple platforms and multiple data signals. So there still needs to be an evolution of just a digital account and usage of the digital account to log in somewhere into truly becoming this digital identity and reusable identity that can be used and that can be again owned or co-owned by together with the end users.
Sure, and I think just you mentioning the end users there has kind of made me think that there's kind of two layers to this process actually. There's obviously the businesses who sort of want people to access their services, and then there's the people who are actually accessing the services. So I think maybe let's examine those separately. How can consumers, end users, people like you and I, how can we benefit from digital identity? What's the benefit for the individual?
We're already benefiting, Chris, quite a lot from digital identities. Without digital identity, as I mentioned at the beginning, you cannot access digital services. So in a way, we really need that. But if we're thinking that if we own the digital identity, just imagine the convenience of using these credentials that you have without proving again and again that you are who you are. I think the best representation of the digital identities and how citizens or individuals are using those identities in a very seamless way. It's a digital identity in Estonia. I'm a little bit biased here because I was born in Estonia. I lived in 5 countries, but I also had a lot of different experiences because I know what digital identity is letting me do in my country. So I actually do not remember verifying myself all the time when I need to access any services, and actually really trust because I can see who has an access to my digital data. So I can log in, I can see somebody looked at my digital data. What was the company? Did they give an access to it? Was it a public service? And why did they access my data? So I have a lot of transparency in that sense. But also the way we are applying that, we can vote, we can do a lot of different things. This kind of enables you this very seamless experience, and you can do that by being anywhere in the world. You don't need to be specifically in that country to do something. And then my experience, for example, is the end user in other countries where I moved to another country, and I needed to start to prove that me is me all over again, and over and over and over again. And just by looking at this, my personal experience, and thinking what digital identity is enabling, it's exactly how quickly and what kind of services you can access. Do you need to prove for several days, weeks, or months that you are a real person, that you have the right to use financial services, and you have the right to rent an apartment, you have the right to have a mortgage, and those kind of things. It just gives people opportunities to have that portability, living anywhere, using whatever service they want, ideally going into any country and not starting from scratch. And it just accelerates everything. It makes our lives better, our lives easier. And I cannot imagine the world in 10 years not having that. I think we should all have that, what we have in some of the most digital countries, because it's just everything goes in seconds, and you have the full control, and you have the full transparency, and it feels amazing.
And I think you probably answered my next question already there a little bit, but it's so I'm sort of thinking about why businesses would care about this too, and I'm guessing that that sort of smoother, more seamless customer experience is one of the big sort of draws. But is there anything else? Would you want to elaborate on that, and are there any other points that businesses should care about when it comes to this sort of digital identity piece?
When I look at the digital identity, and the companies are asking why should we do that, we already do the verification, everything is running smoothly, and we have the process, and we can verify, and absolutely, that actually does work, and you can own all that. But I think the more people are coming, digitally or online, the bigger companies are becoming, the more data they store, and there is definitely the opportunity for the risk for human error, or security, or there are a lot of other aspects that company need to invest and need to worry about. And when you have the digital identity and reusability, it just becomes so much easier. So the overhead is just it's different in terms of the investment, in terms of the protection, in terms of the liabilities and the reputational damage that it can drive. And also digital identity, there is another thing to that. It's protecting companies from fraud. Fraud is a really big issue. So there was one conversation quite recently, last week, I was talking to one customer, big company in fintech, and they said that when they started to grow, they started to implement more rigorously the verification in the kind of the digital identities. It's not exactly the digital identity in the sense that we are looking into the future, but it's the first step. And they said when they implemented that, before, the fraud was problem number one for them, to priority number one. After implementing that, the fraud just moved, into the bottom of all the priorities. So, and digital identity, even it has more power to protect from fraud, because you understand the maturity of the identity, you understand who owns that, and it really helps the companies to, protect consumers, their customers, from those fraudulent transactions, account takeovers, and from future fraud that they experience nowadays quite substantially.
Yeah, and I think that that's an area where Veriff has had quite a long history in helping companies sort of solve those problems, and I think that would be kind of where I'd like to take the conversation next. Actually, is Veriff's position on this, and what could you outline what Veriff's vision is for digital identity? And I think maybe there's a sort of sub-question in there as to sort of why us as well, I suppose. Why is it that Veriff is the one sort of leading this? And just sort of elaborate on that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, at Veriff we want global companies with the global ambition to grow, and to grow really fast, and to grow with the minimum overhead. And identity, if you think about companies going into the new markets, onboarding new consumers, new users that they have, identity is a key ingredient there. So you need to verify people. And we're looking how to make this global growth for them as seamless and as easy as possible, that they don't need to worry about that when they're expanding, when they're growing in their local markets, but where they're also growing globally. Because we're helping them to find those digital identities and help to understand what they need to do in order to let literally users, customers in. So, and this is our vision. We really want that wherever they want to grow, is just extremely easy, magic, plug and play. You seamlessly can integrate the best digital solutions, the best digital components of digital identity, and you can go and start growing from day one. And we want businesses to focus on what they love and what they're good at, and we want to take away everything we love and we are good at. And this is the vision that we have, building this digital identity platform. There are more details to that, but it's still a little bit early to say. I think in a few months would be a better opportunity for us to explain specifically the product. But if you think about Veriff, Veriff is a global company, and you ask why Veriff, we have a lot of experience. We are today operating or serving, more than 260 geographies and then countries. We know a lot of, how to verify people, how to bring people into the online world. We are experts of that. We have proprietary technologies, and we just position so well to go and solve this problem better, deeper, broader, and that's why we're doing it.
That's great, and it's very good that you're here doing it, actually, because whenever we've spoken about this, actually, you're always very animated and excited about this project, and it's obviously that's contagious
Yes.
to everybody else. I think anyone who's had any contact with you is equally enthused by this, and I'm just sort of curious, actually, so what is it that makes you so sort of personally excited about the future of identity? What digital identity? What is it there that is sort of driving you to sort of push this forward?
I see the opportunity, I see the value, I see the change it can bring to the world and to the companies and to the individuals. I think I'm fundamentally driven by making that change happen. I think personal experience I've mentioned before, because I've experienced what digital identity can do, to the economy, to the country, to the individuals, to the businesses. And it's good to sharing is caring, right? It's good also to help others to have exactly the same experience. So I am fundamentally driven. If there is a problem and there is an opportunity and there is a new way of solving that, we should do it. Like, if not we, who else, right? So and that's why I'm so excited having that experience and having that exposure myself and seeing the problem. If there is a problem, go and solve it.
I love that actually. And would you mind just sort of elaborating a little bit on how you're going about doing that? And I think there's obviously so you've outlined what the problem is really clearly actually over the last half an hour or so. But it'd be good just to sort of talk about how exactly you're approaching it within Veriff. I mean, you're building a team. What's your sort of approach to this? And sort of, I guess, I think it's probably worth talking about the how you would see this process unfolding a little bit as well.
Absolutely. I strongly believe that everything needs to start with the problem, whose problem we are solving. And obviously, when we look at the digital identity and the identity management space, the problem space as such is really, really broad. But it's always looking at whom we're going to help and how to understand what they're struggling with and how we can take this pain away. So it's focusing on helping the businesses we serve today and the businesses we will be serving in the future, and understanding where their pain points, how the problems and pains they have in terms of their growth or onboarding their users or doing the identity management, and really thinking what is the right solution, but not going in this direction of how do we solve it today, but thinking how we can solve it tomorrow, how we can disrupt that. Because the world is evolving, technologies are evolving, approaches are evolving. So and this is exactly what we have done. We've been talking to many businesses in different verticals, understanding their pain points. We've been talking what is the best way to solve that, and kind of looking at the problem solution fit, first of all, before building anything, because it's really, really important to laser focus on whose problem we are solving. And from there, I was building the team. I always believe that people with a lot of curiosity and a lot of drive and need to kind of experiment and find better solutions and find better ways of solving for something at the best founding teams, because you don't have the answers. We don't have all the answers. We know that their problem is, but what is the best way to start applying the solutions to solve that problem? So there needs to be this fundamental curiosity, experimentation, no fear. And as a leader, in any type of team, if it's looking into the new space or something that is more mature, you want to create this environment with a lot of trust to experiment, to go, to try, to fail, to learn, but move all the time, because the learning cycle needs to be really, really fast in order really to get to this, like, okay, now we see the traction, now we're really making the difference in the world. And this is exactly how I'm approaching building the teams, bringing the people, and creating that environment.
That's great. I love that, and I think it's. I mean, we're all guilty of, I think, sort of focusing on problems that are right in front of us right now, sort of, and I think sort of taking us out of that sometimes, and sort of pushing our thinking into the future is just a good practice to have anyway. And I think you mentioned a couple of things there, sort of approaching a problem with no fear and that kind of thing. That is quite reflective, actually, of sort of Veriff's, I guess, sort of wider company culture as a whole. How, in your sort of experience here so far, how supportive have you found sort of the company, and how receptive have they been to that sort of change of mindset where we have to sort of take ourselves out of the right now and look towards the future in such a way like this?
Veriff's culture is, we are a big company in a way, but we still have this mentality of it is important to move and to learn and experiment and to solve the problems and execute, rather than, going analysis paralysis. So, and Veriff culture is exactly this culture of very entrepreneurial culture. It's a lot of drive, it's a lot of passion, it's a lot of collaboration there. And it's a lot of this, okay, let's go, vamos, let's go and change these things, and let's go and change things for the better. So it's just a perfect match, to be honest, what we're doing in digital identity and how Veriff culture is in general is.
I would think so, and I think it's, as I say, I've seen the sort of the company be sort of enthused by what you've talked about here, and there's some real excitement around where it's going. And I think just to close things off, then let's talk about that for a moment, because obviously you're building out a kind of a roadmap, if you like. Would you be able to just to sort of outline where you would see this project being in sort of maybe 6 months' time, a year's time, 18 months' time from now?
We have a very clear goal, one goal. We want to launch an MVP. An MVP, it means is that we identified a really big problem, and that is done. We already know in the direction we're going. We identified the best solution to solve that problem, and we've built it in the best possible way, and we have customers waiting for that solution as soon as it is alive to start using and solving that problem together with them. That's the ultimate. That's the roadmap. Having that is our goal.
Excellent. Well, it sounds to me as though we're going to have to reconnect again in a couple of months' time to hear how this is going, because
exactly.
I'm very keen to stay as close to this as possible, because it does sound very exciting. So, look, let's wrap up there, because I think this has been a very good conversation. There's been a lot there to unpick, and as I say, I want to sort of leave some curiosity for next time around. So, Viktoria, just left to say thank you ever so much for joining us, and it sounds a very exciting project, and we're keen to stay informed with it.
Thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries.